Today, I am announcing that the Justice Department will ask a federal court in Texas to subject the state of Texas to a pre-clearance regime similar to the one required by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. This is the department's first action to protect voting rights following the Shelby County decision, but it will not be our last.
Wow. Welcome back to Harbor. That was Attorney General Eric Holder, of course, late last week announcing the first steps of an administration effort, Obama effort, to combat voter suppression. We know what that is, keeping minorities from voting. His comments came just weeks after the Supreme Court ruled to gut key provisions of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. What you heard there, the fight begins in Texas, where Republicans are looking to implement some of the most stringent or whatever voter ID laws in the country. But this is a conflict hardly contained to the Lone Star State. Voter suppression battles are brewing all across the country. I talk about them every night. Take a look at this map. I'll do it again. At least 82 restrictive voting bills have been introduced in 31 states. This is not just a Southern problem. All by Republicans under the leadership of RNC Chair Reince Priebus. He is leading this campaign to keep black people from voting. That's according to the NYU Brennan Center for Justice and the Advancement Project, of course. One of those states, North Carolina, which voted last Thursday to approve harsh voter ID laws and restrictions on early voting. The new rules are expected there to be signed into law by the governor today as Moral Monday protesters marched from the Capitol to voice their frustration with the state's Republican-controlled legislature. Well, today at the White House, President Obama convened a voting rights summit, a meeting with Attorney General Holder, Labor Secretary Perez, and civil rights leaders from across the country. Their focus, safeguarding every eligible American's right to vote. There's Al Sharpton, my colleague, right there in the back. Joining me right now is Urban League President Mark Morial and Leadership Conference President Wayne Henderson. Both were part of today's White House meeting. Mark Morial, thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thanks,
and I shortchanged you. We were right in the middle of the Zimmerman trial down at the Essence Convention. You got shortchanged, so you start out tonight. What can you tell us the president said to your groups tonight, the civil rights groups that lead this country, about what he's going to do to protect the right to vote?
The president and the attorney general were strong. They were forceful. They were resolute that they are going to use their responsibility and their power to enforce the remaining provisions of the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act was wounded. It wasn't killed. There's still many tools in the toolbox of the Justice Department to protect democracy and voting. The president also has designated the attorney general as his point person. And as his point person, the attorney general has already shifted resources. The attorney general has taken action against Texas, and I believe that they are energized by the support they're receiving all across the country. You know, Chris, there was a poll recently, and it indicated that over 50% of the American people across the board disagreed with the decision of the Supreme Court. So we have, I think, popular will on our side, but also what's at stake is the future of democracy. If you look at that map, this effort to suppress the vote, to make it more difficult for people to vote, is inconsistent with everything this nation stands for.
You know, I don't want to enlarge this beyond what it seems to be, Mr. Henderson, but you're involved in fighting for minorities.
That's right.
And you're a leader. It does look like it's almost like South Africa to this extent. You have a white, what's the word? A feeble minority. It's losing its majority status. And it says in the Republican Party, we can only get so many white votes. So we got to reduce the votes of others. It does look that way. Only maybe you're not partisan, but only Republicans have pushed this in these 31 states. No Democratic legislature. You got to look at the pattern here. You're talking about profiling. I'm sorry, Republicans do this stuff.
Look, you've stated a point. In fact, I can't challenge that. I think, though, the president today did something that was really important. He lifted up the importance of the right to vote for all Americans. And obviously, we're concerned about the impact of the Shelby County decision on African Americans and Latinos. But this is a president who talked about the right of every American to vote and underscored the role of the federal government in helping to protect that right under the 15th Amendment of the Constitution. We thought it was a powerful statement and a really important indication to the country that this administration was committed to enforcing the right to vote for all. Now, what Attorney General Holder did last week was to send a powerful signal, not just to Texas, but to the nation, that other aspects of the Voting Rights Act not damaged by the Shelby County decision will be used to help enforce the law. Last week he used Section 3 of the Act, which helped bring in states that might otherwise not have been covered under a preclearance provision. But he also has Section 2 of the Act, which is nationwide in its coverage and allows us to go after discriminatory actors after the act has actually
here's
occurred.
the Republican argument.
Sure.
In some cases, Republicans resort to what you might call made-up voter fraud scandals to help justify voter restrictions. The Washington Post fact checker over the weekend debunked the zombie voters in South Carolina. In 2012, South Carolina's Republican Attorney General said the following: "We found out there were over 900 people who died and then subsequently voted." Well, these allegations, according to the Post, emerged as state officials tried to impose new photo voter ID laws during the election. It turns out none of it was true. The Post dug up a law enforcement report which found that the so-called dead people voters were actually the result of clerical errors or mistaken identities, people voting under different names. Let me get back to Mayor Morial. It just seems to me that nobody denies there are some cases in the country where somebody may have cheated here, but the idea would have affected the results of an election has never been established, or have any significant numbers of people been established as crooked. And yet it's used all the time as a target for Republicans to say we got to have more rigorous rules.
This is Pinocchio. Made-up stories, false arguments, specious suggestions. They're things that are absolutely not true, and we're going to see more of it and more of it and more of it as some people try to hold on to power through these sort of shenanigans and unfair tactics. We're going to be transparent, and we're going to throw a light on all of these bogus, false arguments. But what we're also going to do, I think, Chris, is build a coalition. This is about protecting the rights to vote of all people. Today's meeting included African-American leaders, Latino leaders, leaders from the American Civil Liberties Union, as well as the Asian and American Indian communities. It was a broad meeting to discuss the right to vote. And I believe that Americans have always stood up, time and time again, whether it was to give women the right to vote, whether it's to give 18-year-olds the right to vote, whether it's to strike down the poll tax, whether it was to ensure the right to vote for African Americans. Americans have always sided on expansion of democracy, not a restriction on democracy.
Chris, he's absolutely right. I mean, the truth is, most Americans, when confronted by the facts, will support voting rights protections for all. Okay. And I think that this, what the president has done is said, look, we're going to try to enact new changes in the law. We'll look to both Democrats and Republicans who have treated voting issues as unique among the Constitution.
I just hope we all get used to it. I'm not talking ethnically here, because I'm guilty of it too. Vote in all elections.
Absolutely.
We all get in the habit of voting in the exciting elections like president. You got to vote for state legislature. You're going to lose all these fights. We got to do it. We all have to
vote for the state legislature. You got to vote for school board, mayors, and city. Those elections really affect
justice of the peace.
The things that
reapportionment,
absolutely,
and gerrymandering. Thank you, gentlemen. You know the game,
Thanks,
and you know the
Chris.
contest and the stakes. Thank you, Mayor Morial, and thank you, Wade Henderson.